So you see, folks, there are many paths at the start of the mountain. Many of them appear to be ways to God, but Jesus tells us appearances aren't everything. Appearances can be snares. In fact, all the apparent paths to God, bar one, are not real paths to God. There is only one path, and he says it's by way of the Ten Commandments. And I say that this is the way of the true Ten Commandments as properly understood, and that's only possible in the Catholic Church, as I said in my previous video leading up to this one. But there's a special message here for Protestants and Eastern and Oriental Orthodox. You see how we started together, Eastern and Oriental Orthodox. We went up together quite a way. But then you saw different paths. Oriental Orthodox first, you saw a different path. But still the Eastern Orthodox carried on with us. Then they went off on another path. And then the rest of us carried on. But then the Protestants went off. And of course, none of these were separate groups at the beginning of the journey. They were all with us. But different family members broke off and gave themselves new names. And then the Protestants, as I said, they broke away too. Went to different paths. So, and if you think actually this is not relevant to the Ten Commandments, consider this. Eastern Orthodoxy, and I think Oriental Orthodoxy too, but I'm not certain, so correct me if I'm wrong, allow divorce. Contrary to the Sixth Commandment, as we Catholics count them. There can be no divorce, except in those tiny, limited situations like that St. Paul says, which we call the Pauline privilege, and there's also the Petrine privilege. But in the vast majority of cases, there's no possibility of divorce. And yet, all those who've broken away from us allow for divorce. So they're not following the Ten Commandments, as properly understood. The Protestants are the most radical breakaway because they deny the true understanding in relation to images, in relation to what is a graven image and what is not a graven image, and they barefacedly say so, such as Christian Prince with the Bible in their hands showing sacred images. And Christian Prince says, the difference is those creations, those images are ordered to be created by God. And that's how he gets out of it, he thinks. But in fact, if God has said create this image or that image, such as the huge numbers of images in the temple and in Ezekiel's temple, but that's a hypothetical, that's a temple that was not yet built, but God ordered what it would look like. And you've got the bronze serpent, that means in principle, images are not contrary to the Ten Commandments. If you say God ordered them, that doesn't mean that they then become a different category other than images. They're images that are carved, they're made. That means in principle, carving and creating images are not contrary to the Ten Commandments. To say, well, it's okay only if God orders it, that one needs to find in the Bible, please, Christian Prince or any Protestant, find me in the Bible where you have to get a direction from God before you can create an image. So for example, think about this. In the Temple of Solomon, we have carved images. Now we know the temple was destroyed. Then the temple was rebuilt under King Herod. He did most of the work to get it going, to get it built, and it took decades. But that temple was not built on a kind of divine plan. It was just the genius of the architectural skills of the time. Are you saying that they could not have carved in lions, bulls, angels into the ornamentation of the temple? They could not actually even copy exactly the ornamentation that's described in the Book of Kings or in Numbers. Numbers is the serpent, isn't it? But in the Book of Kings and the Book of Ezekiel, for example, they couldn't do that because God hadn't directly told them to. So it would be a breaking of the commandment. But this would be absurd, wouldn't it? You could produce an exact replica of Solomon's temple after it had been destroyed. And according to the Protestant position and Christian Prince's position, it seems to me logically, the logical conclusion is that you could not even build a replica of the temple unless a prophet came along and said, oh yes, God says you can reproduce the images that were in the temple. This is absurd. You do not need God to tell you directly that you can create images. The point is, you cannot worship images. And I've said before, there's repeating, if anyone, I've had Protestant folks say this to me, God bless them. I mean, there's a level of ignorance amongst all of us. So we can't kind of just look at others and say they're ignorant and we're not ignorant. But there are Protestants who say, you worship statues. I mean, come on, this is 21st century England or 21st century France, Germany, America, whatever. We're not like in a shamanistic culture. We're not like primitives, you know. We all went to school. So, that commandment doesn't apply to us. If you think it ever applies to Catholics in the last 2,000 years, I challenge you to give me an example of a Catholic worshipping a statue in the Middle Ages. When we kiss them, I challenge you to show that we think they're goddesses of Mary. It's absurd. Just drop this. Have your criticisms, and when they're dealt with, drop them. And if you've got other criticisms, that's fine. And we can go through these things systematically. But don't keep on with silly statements. It suggests an evil spirit. I don't mean possession, but I mean a kind of evil quality that you will not accept logical explanations, because it suggests that there's a love hanging onto a prejudice. If I ever do that, give me a rational explanation. If I don't therefore accept that, I'm out of order. And I should correct myself. This is how we can proceed in love and reason. Come, let us reason together, the Bible says. St. Peter says, give people a reason for your beliefs. So no vehemence, no vitriol, just clear, rational thinking. And before we open our traps, we say, is this really, am I thinking this through? So that's why Christian Prince is just, love him to bits, but that's why he's not thinking this through when he speaks in the way he does of sacred images. But one could still say something here. We have the Old Testament. It's a fair point to say there can't be in principle a rejection of images. But how are we to know whether God wants this? He could be indifferent to it. He could say, okay, you can do that, but I'm not particularly, bothered. And of course, there's a risk that you might start worshipping them as a goddess. I mean, this is 21st century England, but because we provoked the Russians so much, and we're a little island, and we're sending them sending the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian puppet regime, to help further destroy Ukraine. We're sending them our Storm Shadow missiles to go deep into Russia if the Americans will say yes to the Brits, yes, we can do this. So we are target number one. And if you read Annie Jacobson's book on nuclear war, which came out last year, you'll see that no European government is in the position of the British government. The British government, the UK Prime Minister, has the sole authority to authorise the launch of United States nuclear weapons which are placed on European soil. So the naval base in Naples, any of the NATO bases around Europe, American missiles can be launched freely from the continental United States. But to be launched from anywhere in Europe requires the assent of the British Prime Minister. So we're target numero uno for the Russians. So we have to be aware that one day, I don't think this will happen, by the way, because I believe that there's a prophecy of last select, which I've mentioned briefly before, but I'll not talk about it today. But there's strong reason to believe that England, Britain, our Scots, Welsh brothers, and our Irish brothers, who are so close to us that they are brothers, even though they're no longer part of the United Kingdom. I wish they were. I wish we'd had a lovely settlement. So Britain was the four nations as it was as at 1921-22. But we here messed it up. So water under the bridge. But brothers are brothers. So we are target number one for the Russians. So there's a risk that we will be driven back to the Stone Age before any other country is. And if that were to happen, we would then perhaps see people gathering old statues from the rubble of Catholic churches and getting to worship them, because we would have devolved from Catholic civilization into something extremely primitive. And one could then say that shouldn't happen. So the point here is that there are circumstances in which one might worship a statue. So how do we know then that having statues is really okay? It might be a situation which could become a real problem later on. Here's how we know. We need the word from God. How do we get that? There are no prophets anymore. I mean, if you born-again Christians believe all those characters who call themselves prophets, I'm sorry for you. There's no prophecy in born-again Christianity. You've got to accept that, surely. These characters are charlatans. But it's not the way it is with the Catholic Church. Not the way it is. We do have real prophets. I'll give you an example. I'm going to talk about this on another video. In 1981, June 26, 1981, June 25th, 1981, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to some children in Bosnia-Herzegovina when it was run by communists, part of communist Yugoslavia. They were harassed and harassed. They said that she'd appeared to them, and the word mir, M-I-R, the word mir appeared in the sky. It means peace. Why there? Why that word? Why then? Well, on June the 25th, 1991, exactly 10 years after, war broke out in that region. Yugoslavia was breaking up. Serbia sent the forces of the Yugoslav army to attack Croatia, and the worst war in Europe since the end of the Second World War broke out. See why the Blessed Mother came there exactly 10 years before the war broke out? I could tell you even more about Rwanda. That I knew that it was going to happen. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. That I knew something was going to happen in Africa, probably Rwanda, before it happened. Oh no, let me not say that. Let me say this, that had I read more about what I had read before that war broke out, I would have known something terrible was going to happen. Some massacres were going to happen in Rwanda because of Catholic prophecy. And I'll do a video on this. You Protestants need to know about real prophecy. You really do. Okay, and this is not to put you down. You can't help it if you've got charlatans everywhere. But you really need to know that God speaks. He really does. Just not to charlatans. All right. Now, the thing is that I was saying that, before I went off on a frolic, I was saying that we need a prophetic voice to tell us that statues are okay. Because, as I say, you could say, you've got to be, if you look into the Old Testament, you can say it's a neutral position. They may be okay, they may not be okay. It depends. So in principle they're okay, but in particular situations you do not know whether statues are okay or not, or sacred pictures are okay or not. You just don't know. But you can't rule them out, and because of different situations, different circumstances, like us being blasted by nuclear war, say, you can't know whether it's the right thing to have. So how do we know? The prophetic voice of the Catholic Church comes in here. This is the church established by Christ. And it has said since the time of the fathers of the church. And in the Second Council of Nicaea in 787 AD, when this became a new thing, that you shouldn't have statues, that you shouldn't have sacred art. That's why we only had the council about this in the 8th century. If the iconoclastic revolution had happened before then, we would have had the council then. It would have been determined then. These councils have arisen to address problems. That's why they sometimes occur late. But the fact that the council decides X, Y, Z is wrong, ABC is okay, is because ABC was being done up to that point and X, Y, Z was a new thing that came in much later and has to be addressed. There was no controversy over sacred images in the early centuries. So, the Catholic Church has carried the tradition, like a woman carrying a child in her womb, securely, safely down the centuries. It's others, not real parents of the tradition, not real parents of the revelation, but evil step-parents. I'm sure most step-parents are not like that, but the evil step-parent of literature, the evil stepmother of the kind of grim fairy tale. They abuse the tradition. They abuse the Cinderella of our sacred tradition. I didn't think I'd get that in, actually. Quite happy with that. We carry it like a mother. Holy Mother Church is mother for various reasons, and this is one of them. She carries this tradition that sacred images are valid. And as I was saying on another video, Christian Prince uses the Bible. He has the exact same New Testament that we have. It's an odd number of books, 27. Why 27? Why not 28? Why not 26? You've got 27 because, and all the Christians have 27. Because no matter what you say, oh well, we have this tradition that's gone on for years and years, and that's kind of, how we get the 27. You're using sacred tradition then, by the way. Very naughty, very inconsistent. But even if you were to do that, we know that some regions of the Christian world in the ancient centuries doubted the second letter of St. Peter, doubted the book of Revelation. So who's to decide? This is what the Catholic Church did in the councils of the 4th century. First one, the Council of Rome in 382, presided over by Pope St. Damasus I. You can't get more papal than that. That's how Christian Prince knows he's got a true New Testament. But as I said before, at that time, Christians were honouring the images, the sacred images, statues, holy pictures. These were priests, these men were priests and bishops of a priesthood established by Christ. But Christian Prince doesn't believe in that, as well as not believing the images. They offered the holy sacrifice of the Mass, where the bread and the wine become the body and blood of Christ, though retaining the appearances of bread and wine, to put it in a non-technical way. But Christian Prince won't believe in that. He's not said so, but I can see now that he doesn't believe in that. It's pretty much a firm deduction one can make. But how can he accept the New Testament of 27 books? If he doubts the priests whom he regards as idolaters, no doubt heretics in a general sense. And this applies to all you Protestant folks. Get with the programme. You're using our book. If you're using our book, you're using the book of people you can't call heretics. Because if they're heretics, you can't use this book. You've got to go back to square one and try and work out what the Bible should be. This is what Martin Luther did. He was consistent. You've got to be consistent too. He wanted to throw out Letter of James, Book of Revelation. You've got to be like him. Don't be inconsistent. Don't be double-minded, as St. James speaks of people who are double-minded. Don't suffer from cognitive dissonance, where you're willing to hold one thing, oh yeah, I've got the Bible, but hold the other, which is a contradictory viewpoint, that the bishops who gave us this Bible, who affirmed these were the inspired books and these alone, they're kind of heretics. You can't have these two things in your brain at once. Cut it out. Stop and think. Reevaluate your situation. So I'll finish with a reflection that this parable of Jesus, and isn't it wonderful? Isn't it beautiful? I mean, I just think it's one of those beautiful things. And because it's this is one of 5 volumes. This is volume 4. It's thick, right? Thick. Look at the writing. This is not big writing. These are thick books. This is the gospel. It's most of these 5 volumes. Most of them are just the gospel, just the 4 gospels, giving you all the detail that couldn't be put in there by Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John. Remember, John said, if all the deeds of Jesus were written down, and all the books could hold them in all libraries of the world, I paraphrase, of course. And we're getting huge amounts of stuff here. Why? Because we're entering the end of the age. Jesus wants us to have this. You Protestants, many of you have a deep sense that these are the end times. We Catholics don't have as much of a sense as you do, so God bless you, thank you. I'll reach out there and shake your hands. But he's given us this, for you as well as us. So Francis, who said all roads are roads to God, is contradicted here. So lest I leave a very loose end, understand this. Official teachings of the Catholic Church, official teachings of the Pope are valid and must be followed. Unofficial teachings, chit-chats with a bunch of kids in Singapore, that's not the same. You don't have to follow that. Otherwise, I'd have to find out what kind of cream cake the Pope prefers. I know he's a big fella now. I know even when he wasn't in a wheelchair and he was walking around, he was still getting big. Since between 2013 and the election, and him, having to be in a wheelchair because of his problems walking, he had an expanding waistline. I'm telling you, how many white outfits he's had, I don't know, but I bet you there've been quite a few as he's grown. So he must like certain puddings and cakes. Well, if I could find out what he likes, wouldn't I be more kind of Catholic? No, it doesn't matter what he likes. Doesn't matter. All that matters is what he officially teaches. So all you Catholics out there who are a bit confused, and I get the impression there are 1 or 2, that we can't criticise this or that. Make no mistake. And I say this to ordinary Catholics who are a bit troubled by this. If we don't criticise this statement by the Pope, there are very weak Catholics out there who are going to become weaker, more confused, and they'll end up leaving the faith. We've got no choice now. We've got to speak. We can't be wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed, or pretend he didn't say this, because Catholics hear it. Jesus spoke in Valtorta's writings about children. They hear things. You don't think they're hearing things. In the house, when you're speaking, they're hearing things. They're picking it up if you're a parent. We overheard conversations, but didn't we, when we were kids, that our parents didn't think that we're overhearing? Well, that's every child is like that. And we Catholics are like children. They pick up. We might be sophisticated and say, oh, we'll ignore that, or we'll Pope explain that away. The flock, the sheep, are hearing it as it is. So somebody's got to correct it. Somebody's got to say, lest the sheep go astray. So I say to you, Catholic, who is confused, just accept the official teachings of the Church. And if you have queries about the official teaching, don't say, as somebody said to me in a comment section, oh well, if the Pope says something which I'm not sure about, I'll look at the Bible. No. Absolutely not. Protestants saying, what? No. Here's what you do. If the Pope says something, or seems, even in an official document of his, to contradict what you think is correct, then you go first to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's available everywhere. It's even available free online. And you look at what that says about this particular issue. And it's got a great index, good content section, great index for you to find what you want. And if you're looking online, you can type in a keyword. The paragraph in the book itself, the hard copy, you've got paragraphs down the sides which refer you to other paragraphs. You've got copious footnotes. You go there first because that gives you a systematic explanation of the truth, and it gives you a systematic explanation of what's in the Bible, what the Bible says about this or that subject. If you go to the Bible first, you're going to end up in a swamp. You'll probably actually end up Protestant. Because what they, and by the way, and that is an unfortunate thing to do, because if you say, go to a Protestant and say, well, this Catholic said, look at the Catechism, not the Bible, and the Protestant says, terrible, look at the Bible, what's he trying to hide from you? Well, here's what you have to say is this. One Bible, 50 Protestants, 50 different views of what the Bible's saying on a particular subject. One Bible, 5,000 Protestants, 5,000 different views about what the Bible has to say on a particular subject. You get what I'm saying? You're no better than Protestants. I'm no better than a Protestant. If I go to the Bible, I'll make my own interpretation as well. We're all doing it. It'll be a world of Christian popes. Popes here, popes there, popes everywhere. All contradicting each other. You have to find an authentic, authoritative teacher. And you only find that by finding out which church was established by Christ 2,000 years ago. And don't say it was just a bunch of guys, because it's an institution with leaders. As we see, Paul, Peter, the apostles, they're leaders. They're followers. We're followers. We're not priests. We're not bishops. That's where we go to. And the teachings of the church is distilled in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And if you still have a problem, because though it's over 2,700 paragraphs, it can't cover everything on earth. There are theological manuals which go more deeply into a subject, produced by trustworthy Catholics, which are in line with the faith of 2,000 years. So you go to them next. There are manuals of moral theology and dogmatic theology. So you want to know about a moral matter, you go there. You want to know about dogmatic issues such as about Christ being God or the Trinity, you go there. Dogmatic manual. Start from the Catechism and pursue in a Catholic context. Because if you go to the Protestants or you go to the Bible, you will end up with 1,000 views on a single subject. Because you can think 1,000 ways around a single subject. You really can. Okay, maybe not 1,000, that's very creative to do that. But you can have several different opinions on what a particular verse of the Bible means. Don't end up in that swamp. There's no need. Don't reinvent the wheel. Jesus set it all down. He established his church so you wouldn't end up in the swamp. So, any Catholic who's in doubt, go to the Catechism and then go from there, as I've said. If you go following these other paths, where people are saying, come over here, as in the parable, you won't make it to the top. This is why I said, no salvation outside the Catholic Church. There's one path. There's one path. And it's a very narrow path. Did not Jesus say in Scripture, it's a narrow path. So we go along that path. But remember, I also said, although there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church, God the Father said in this parable, the parable of the Ten Commandments, the parable of the paths leading up to the summit, or the one path leading up to the summit, and other paths leading up to the summit, which don't lead to the summit. God the Father said, if he had repented and turned back, traced back his steps, I would have forgiven him. Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Protestants, trace back. Is it not Jeremiah 6:16? Let me find it because I'm feeling in the mood. Yes, Jeremiah 6:16. Thus says the Lord, stand by the roads and look, and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. I set watchmen over you, saying, give heed to the sound of the trumpet. But they said, we will not give heed. And then God says he's bringing evil on the people because they would not heed. I mean, this can apply to modern Britain. We say this about all our European brothers and sisters and all our European nations, even though they're set far apart in Australasia and the United States and Canada and South America. But none of us paying heed. But in terms of paths, Pope Francis says many paths to God. We say with Jeremiah, there's one path, the ancient path. Go back to it. Stand by the road and look for it. So people come back. Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, come back. Coptic Orthodox, come back. Protestants, especially, because you have so much error that's been taught to you, come back. If you don't, you're at risk of eternal damnation, all of you. But as I said in a previous video, I believe that because you've gone so far off the path, the exertion of will that's required to come back to the right path. It is doable, because God never puts you in a situation you cannot get out of. But he knows we're weak. So those of you who might say, this man is despairing of my salvation and I'm a Christian, I believe, as Saint Faustina said, and I quoted, at the last moment, up to the last moment of your life, maybe well before that, hopefully well before that, but even up to the last moment of your life, God will visit you with the truth and offer you entry into the Catholic Church. Reject it, you will be damned forever. And by the way, and you accept it, heaven will be yours. Maybe via purgatory. And if anybody wants to say there's no purgatory, go and watch my videos in Hyde Park about purgatory. It's logically necessary. It really is. It's not a matter of doctrine now, it's logically necessary. If you believe we're perfect in heaven, but we're imperfect when we die, there has to be an intermediate stage. But 2 Maccabees 12 verse 45 pretty much nails it. And there are other verses like 1 Corinthians 3, I think. 1:3:13, I don't know, but I can't. I'm not going to go there right now because I don't want to get onto a discussion of purgatory. So, if you are on the wrong path, you could be saved nonetheless. But you just can't presume on the mercy of God. You can't presume on it. There's one ark that the human race, it was a vast ark, not just to save animals, to save human beings as well. Not just Noah's family, but everybody turned it down. Don't be in that position. Look at early Christian writings. And hopefully we'll all meet together. You, your family, my dogs. Well, yeah, I know. I don't think St. Thomas Aquinas would like that bit. But what can I say? What does he know? Right, so I think that's it, pretty much. For now, anyway.